Welcome back to another episode of Mormon Traditionalist Podcast. My name is Jaron O'Driscoll, and I am your host. And today we're finishing up my conversation with David Hocking. We talk in part 2 about his other annotated projects, the books of Isaiah, Enoch, and Jasher. Don't forget real quick to leave a rating and review, you guys. It really does go a long ways to helping this podcast get more exposure to other traditionalists like you. Okay, let's get into the episode. So what you're telling me, David, is I can now read the Book of Mormon, reading the annotated edition, and I don't have to skip through half of 2nd Nephi now?
Yeah. And one of the things, and that's a good point, because, you know, the old tale is that 2 missionaries are out walking in the streets in Chicago. A gang comes along, they have a gunfire, and it hits the pocket of one of the missionaries, and he falls on the ground. And so the companion says, "Oh my God, my companion's dead." The guy gets up and he says, "No, it's okay. I had a little pocket edition of the Bible, the Book of Mormon in my pocket." And he opens it up and the bullet falls out. He says, "See, even a bullet can't penetrate Isaiah." So that's the comment. They get to the Isaiah section and they go, "I'm not going to do this. I can't understand this stuff."
And I say that jokingly, but I know growing up it was very difficult for me. And I mean, there's a reason we have Isaiah classes.
Yeah. Right?
They teach it in seminary. We have them in church sometimes.
Yeah.
But yeah, the annotated edition does a really good job of making that. And Isaiah, I think, too, is such an important book.
Oh, yeah.
And it's too important, I think, to just gloss over it like that. So I think it's really important to have
this
that.
This is my opinion, too, and I'm glad you bring that up, because it's my opinion. This is my point of view. It's my unique point of view, but there's many reasons you can say that Nephi was commanded to make another set of plates. It's always referred to as for a wise purpose, and we always assume that a wise purpose, rightly so, was because the Lord knew that the 116 pages would be lost, and there had to be a replacement for it, and so therefore, for a wise purpose, I'm doing this, so this will be the replacement. I like to take an additional approach and go further with that. I believe that I just potentially believe that because Mormon's the editor of the Plates of Mormon, and he is not doing a lot of first person, Nephi and I, Jacob, and so forth. And because it's an abridgment from the wars and contentions of the kings of my people, that we would not have a lot of the book of Isaiah in the book of Lehi. I think it would be more of a historical record. And I think the wise purpose really is more about why we have Isaiah in the small plates, because it takes up a large portion of it with a large portion of commentary on just what they quoted. So if you go through and look at it from that point of view, especially if you see it from my annotated book, a Mormon point of view, you'll see what I'm talking about. You will see that he quotes extensive passages, and then he does extensive commentary on what he just quotes. So he becomes your guide to understand what you've just read. And if you miss out on just stopping when you see the Isaiah sections and then move on, you're going to miss why the wise purpose was there.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I've never thought of that way. So you've done Isaiah.
Yeah.
That's not where you started. So we did the Book of Mormon first. Let's talk about Jasher and then Enoch. Tell me about the Book of Jasher. And I think most people maybe haven't even heard that name or that term.
Yeah.
So what is the Book of Jasher? Give us some background on it first before you got to the point where you started annotating it. Where did it come from? Give us that story and background.
Yeah, so that's a great question, and it's one that I get to answer quite often. And
most importantly, specifically the question of why is it not in the standard works?
Yeah, well, a lot of those are definitely something that needs to be answered. So it's regarding how did I get to know and why the Book of Jasher and so forth. So not only did I do the reformatting of the text of the Book of Mormon, I decided to start with in the beginning God created the earth, heavens and the earth. So I have reformatted the Old Testament. And so that's one of the things in the future. I'll have an annotated edition of the Old Testament. I've already, in 2022, next year, I'll have completed the annotated edition of the Joseph Smith translation of the New Testament, which will be the 1867 edition that was first printed by the Reorganized Church, and now the Community of Christ Church. But anyways, what I'm getting at is that my ultimate goal is to do all the Scriptures. So as I was going through the Old Testament, I came across a section in Joshua. It says, "Is this not written in the book of Jasher?" And that just jumped out at me. What does that mean? That's one of the lost books. Is this not written in the book of Jasher? And then in the book of Samuel, you've got the story of Judah saying, "Teach them the use of the bow." It is written in the book of Jasher. So what made me think about that is similar to what Mormon's doing. Mormon is taking a bunch of plates that have the history, and then he's introducing Zeniff, or he's introducing Amalek, or he's introducing these war epistles that going back and forth. So he's collecting. He's seeing the metal plates. He's reading them. He's going through the history, and he's choosing what to put in, not to put into his narrative in his plates of Mormon. And I see the same thing with the book of Samuel and Joshua. They're doing the same thing. They're looking through the records, and they go, "It's obviously written in the book of Jasher. You can go to it and read it."
Just a quick reference.
Yeah,
assuming that the author knows, or that the reader knows,
that
and has access to it.
And since we don't have it, where is it? So now that's the controversy, what I'm doing, is it the actual book of Jasher? Well, I can suggest, and it's just a suggestion, that with my research and the way you look at the Annotated book of Jasher, the way I've created the format and what I do for my insights, I will suggest to you that it is what it is. It is the book of Jasher that is spoken of in the Old Testament. And I also will say that in my research, that the book of Jasher is being quoted twice in the Book of Mormon. And I have that as evidence because I went and formatted the book of Jasher in a way that I was able to see those passages as I was reading it in the book of Jasher. I go, I think I've seen this before. I know that Captain Moroni talks about Joseph's coat being rent, and he doesn't want to be trodden underfoot like his brethren did to Joseph. You don't read that in the Old Testament. So I go back to the book of Jasher, and I says, these are the elements. You've got the coat being rent, dips it in the blood of the kid, then they take the rent, torn garment, and they trample it in the dust, and then they finally give that to their father, Jacob. And what does Moroni do? He says, we don't want to be trodden underfoot by our brethren. We don't want our clothes to be clothing to be rent like Joseph's coat was rent and be trodden under. I go, where did Captain Moroni get these elements of Joseph's coat being rent and being trodden on? It came from the book of Jasher. So there's my evidence that that's an ancient text.
So where else? So besides somewhere in the repository,
yeah.
Where else? Where did the book of Jasher come from? Where do we get it? Where
so
did
the
it
book of
originate?
Jasher,
when did it come to light? In
yeah.
modern
So
day?
the book of Jasher, I think, and it's just all speculation. It's all pie in the sky stuff. But the reality is that there was a manuscript that was found during the siege of Jerusalem, which is the destruction of Jerusalem, 70 A.D. Titus was the emperor. The Roman Empire stretched all the way from Portugal, or the Iberian Peninsula, we call it then. And so those soldiers came from different areas, and one of the soldiers came from the Iberian Peninsula, from what we call Spain today. And as soldiers always do, and you read it always in the Old Testament, it's always the spoils of war. The conqueror gets the conqueror, and now I possess your possessions. I get to get your gold, your silver, or whatever your possessions are. So this Titus thought there were some treasures in a building, and he felt that maybe behind this wall, he suspected that there could be some treasures there. He knocked down the wall, and lo and behold, there's a rabbi hiding in there. And he had a bunch of food in there. He had wine. He had a lot of, food. Evidently, this rabbi, this scholar, Hebrew scholar, protected these manuscripts that were sacred to him and to the Hebrews. And he was, going in for the long haul. He kind of knew the prophecy, and he could hear the destruction going on. So, but Titus, instead of thinking of killing the guy and destroying the documents, had kind of pity on the guy, and he says, this is kind of my spoils of war. I know a lot of the Jews have been fleeing to the Iberian Peninsula. There's a lot of Jews there. I'm just going to take it back, and perhaps I can get some value. Maybe there's some value in it that's for me. I'm just suggesting this is what his thought process was. But eventually it went back. The Hebrew scholar went back with him. Eventually those manuscripts got into the colleges. Those colleges got dispersed to other colleges. It got into Italy. The first publication of the Sefer Yahasher. Now, the Hebrew name is Sefer, meaning book, and Ha never precedes a proper name. So Jasher is not a name of an individual. It means the book of the upright or the upright ones. And what it is Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. It's the Hebrew book of the uprights or the patriarchs. So what we have is an early form of a secular history that parallels the Old Testament through Joshua. So if you read the book of Jasher, it's like reading the Old Testament. However, it's a little bit more secular. It's similar to the large plates of Mormon. It's a secular history. And then Mormon, the editor, is giving you the spiritual side of why you're reading this stuff. So it's kind of cool, isn't it?
It is.
So now you're getting more depth. I'm getting deeper, for you farmers out there that need to, understand this stuff. But you think, again, Joseph Smith is think how we can incorporate some of these materials in Captain Moroni. How did Joseph Smith get these elements in that story that's found in the book? So now, when does the book of Jasher become available to the public to read in English?
That's the next question.
So how does that happen? Well, that book of Sefer Yahasa that was published in Italy, in Venice, that was in 1625. And in the book, you'll see the frontispiece. I have a copy of that. You'll see it's in pure rabbinical Hebrew, meaning that it's without points or diacritical marks. Those are terms used by the Mezerites, because the Mezerites was a form of group of Jewish writers, scholars in Jerusalem that were concerned over, if you want to call it, of how the rabbis were reading the Torah. Because, as you know, in Hebrew, there are no vowels. And you could interpret things by introducing different vowels. So when they came up with a system of what they call points, the points were underneath the lettering. And then they would have how you would read the word by using what they call incantation marks. They call those diacritical marks, and they're above the lettering. So when you see some of the scripts that are done, when you read the Hebrew, you'll see these marks. You'll see these little tiny points underneath the lettering, and you'll see these other letterings above it. And those are the diacritical marks, and those are the points. Well, the book of Jasher had none of that. So the translator, who is Moses Samuel, says, I have to do this because it's without points. So when I read that, I go, what does that mean? It's without points. So then I did research. Well, it means it predates the Mezerites. When were the Mezerites? Well, the Mezerites were the 10th or 11th century A.D. So what we're getting in our Old Testament is a text that was done by King James in 1611 based on the Masoretic text that they did in the 10th and 11th century A.D. So this predates it by many centuries.
Yeah, by a long time.
So that's what I'm saying. It's an ancient text. So then, eventually, up in Liverpool, England, there's a Moses Samuel. He understands Hebrew. He's a pure, he understands Hebrew. He likes it. He says, this is without points. This is great. This is pure rabbinical Hebrew. So he then translates it. And in my introductory material, I show all of the certificates. So other scholars looks at the text of the Hebrew text, compared it to his interpretation or his translation. I go, it's really looking good. Now, I'm sure that many people come back and look at the original text and come back with maybe a cleaner translation, but that's what was translated in 1839. That's critical. That's a 10-year lapse between the Book of Mormon was translated in 1829. In 1830, it gets published, the Book of Mormon, but in 1840, the book of Jasher gets. So there's a 10-year lag. And that's when it becomes available in the United States. Why? Because it's published in the United States by Mordecai Noah, who is a New York Jew, a prominent Jew of his time. And he is from the Iberian Peninsula, where the original book of Jasher went to after it had found. All these connections are cool.
So unfortunately, Joseph Smith never had an opportunity to come upon that or do anything with it.
Actually, what he did is, in the Times and Seasons, several of the people noted that the book of Jasher was not a bad author, because they talk about Abraham and Heron and so forth in the book of Jasher, and they're proving that the book of the Old Testament is true because even the book of Jasher said this and that. So the church was well aware, the members of the church and Joseph Smith was aware, although the Times and Season is an unsigned editorial, so it's an anonymous person writing that commentary. More than likely it's not Joseph Smith. He would have normally, I think, have signed his name to it like he did with the Wentworth letter or
Correct.
church history. But what I'm getting at is that the church was aware of it, others recognized it, and in fact when Moses Samuel passed away, the copyright of that went to the J.H. Perry Company out of Salt Lake City. So the book of Jasher was highly prized by the early saints as another way of showing that other records would come forth and that this is one of those lost books. So that's why I say it's got good provenance to it. And
Right.
I believe that because I have found passages within the book of Jasher that relate to things within the Book of Mormon, it substantiates that these other books that's spoken of in the Book of Mormon that would come forth includes what I have been talking about. The book of Jasher is one, the book of Enoch is another that I'll get into. But these books have come later, and then the translations of English come later, and then as you go through these books, lo and behold, because the Book of Mormon is a collection of records that were kept in real time, but they also had the plates of brass. You know, Lehi was commanded to go back to Jerusalem, go up to Jerusalem. It's an elevated place. You're going to go up to the Jerusalem. You could go up from the north. You can go down south. You're still going up to Jerusalem. You can go the east, west. You're still going up because it's high up. That's what you mean up or down. It's elevation, not north or south. So they go up to Jerusalem to get the plates of brass. And Nephi says specifically, the only way we can keep the commandments is to live the law of Moses. And the only way we're going to get the law of Moses is to have these plates of brass because it's contained in there. And the very first thing you do in the law of Moses is celebrate the Passover. You know, the male lamb has to be sacrificed. So when they go to the land of promise, they're going to have to go to a place where they have lambs. They have to have sacrifices. Mm-hmm. So anyways, those are the connections I'm making throughout the Book of Mormon. So why go up there to get the plates of brass so they can have the law of Moses? But on the plates of brass that came from Laban we know is from the house of Manasseh, Joseph, tribe of Manasseh. We know that Joshua, when he left Egypt, he was from the tribe of Joseph. He was from the house of Joseph, tribe of Manasseh. So potentially it was Joshua that kept the records that were in Jerusalem, that were in Egypt, that had these other manuscripts. Potentially. This is just, again, theory. And so therefore, Laban was the one that had, in his genealogical line, he became the one that possessed those plates. That's why they had to go get them and preserve them. And the Book of Mormon has sections that are in that book of plates of brass that are, we find things that are statements in the Book of Mormon that we don't find in the Old Testament, but are Old Testament stories, yet they're not in the Old Testament. More than likely, they were on the plates of brass. Therefore, we can then say with the Book of Jasher, now the Book of Enoch, which we'll get into, these things, these phrases, these things, these fragments are in the Book of Mormon. Therefore, we can assume they came from the plates of brass.
Right. And that's really important. This is the importance, guys, of the Book of Jasher and the Book of Enoch. These are outside sources that are corroborating the truthfulness of the Book of Mormon. Let's go into that a little bit with the Book of Enoch. We talked about Isaiah. We've talked about Jasher. What's in the Book of Enoch that fills that role and shows proves the authenticity of the Book of Mormon and supports it, as well as Joseph Smith?
Yeah. So the first thing that jumped at me as I did the project is and I'll go into this a little bit later here, but there's multiple forms of the Book of Enoch, and they were discovered in different countries and different languages. So there's what they call the Ethiopic Enoch. That was in Ethiopia. That was the first to be discovered by James Bruce, who was a Scottish explorer looking for the source of the Nile River. He goes to the libraries and looks at the manuscripts, and he finds these. He was told that this is the ancient Book of Enoch in a Ge'ez language, or Ge'ez, G-E, accent, E-Ez. That's the Southern Semitic language, which is, again, goes back to the Hebrew style of writing. But it's about a book of Enoch. He gets 3 copies of these texts, and he takes them back to Scotland. Eventually, a person by the name of Richard Lawrence understands and can interpret Giaz into English. He gets translated in 1821. It's manuscript form, Bodleian Library in Cambridge, England. That's one form. You get another form. It's Professor Sokolov out of Russia. He's researching stuff in the Belgrade Laboratory in Moscow. He comes across what they call Church Slavonic. That's a type of language that's in Slavonic, used by the churches in Russia, in the Russian-speaking country, language-speaking country, Slavonic-speaking country languages. It's a special language called Church Slavonic, and it's about Enoch. And so somebody in Moorfield in England, he understands that Church Slavonic. He translates to English in 1896. In English, that's called Second Enoch because it was found second. And then you find this Hugo Odeberg. He's out of Sweden. He collects these collections of Hebrew writings that relate to Enoch called, it's actually Metatron, which is really Enoch. And he takes them into the heavenly realms and a temple setting. That's what we call Third Enoch. That was done in 1928. Again, the book of Jasher we just talked about, that was translated in 1840. Published in 1840, translated in 1839, but chapters 3 and 4 is about Enoch. There's another little section called the Legends of the Jews by Louis Ginsberg. He's a Jewish, German Jew. He creates a narrative based on traditional material that comes from the Jewish lexicon of library, of histories. The Haggadah, the Mishnah, the Midrash, all these different things. He creates a narrative from that. He's got it in several volumes. Volume 1, Section 3 is about Enoch. So I have all of these in my book of Enoch. And why I do that is because Joseph Smith receives pure revelation in 1830, end of 1830, 1831, Moses chapter 6 and 7. And that is Enoch. And so it's intriguing that Joseph Smith had no manuscripts. He had nothing to look. He didn't use the Urim and Thummim. He had nothing in front of him. Sidney Rigdon was the scribe. He's going through the Joseph Smith translation of the Old Testament. And the very first thing, you get Moses chapter 1, Moses chapter 2, then you get 3 and 4. And then all of a sudden, chapter 6 is about Enoch. Chapter 7, Enoch. Chapter 8, you get into now Noah. So now you've got this pure, unadulterated revelation coming through. You got Sidney Rigdon, who's the scribe. There's nothing in front of him, no manuscript, no Urim and Thummim, nothing. And you've got this. So now how we compare that to these other things that come later that get published. And so as I do this, and I go through these things, in 1 Enoch chapter 93, all of a sudden I see things that jump out at me. And what I'm jumping out is these riches that have become slippery. You can't hold on to them. You're not remembered your God. It's your destruction. Where have I heard that? I go back and look at Helaman, Samuel the prophet, and all of those elements. Your destruction's made sure. You have not retained your riches. They become slippery. You've not remembered your Most High God in the days you gave. I go, look at this. This is exactly the book of Enoch. It's got to be on the plates of brass. These are so many elements of that passages that are in the Book of Mormon. I go, lo and behold, this is another text that supports that this is an ancient text. If Enoch is found in the Book of Mormon, what I'm doing now is an authentic Book of Enoch. The Book of Mormon proves it. So now I've done the annotated edition of the Book of Enoch. And what it does, it correlates all of these Enoch texts, and I have 15 pages of double columns. In the left column, passages from the Moses chapters, and in the right column, passages from the different Enoch texts, 1st, 2nd Enoch, and Jasher, and the Legends of the Jews. And I show for 15 pages that there are bingos, bullseyes. And all you read in the Old Testament is in Genesis about Enoch being no longer with the earth. He gets somehow translated. You read in Hebrews chapter 11, Paul says, we know that Enoch was translated. You get Jude, verse 40-something, it says that Enoch will come with 10,000 angels. All we get about Enoch, and yet you've got all of this information about this great prophet Enoch, And Joseph Smith, his credentials as a prophet really is the Book of Enoch, because he had no manuscript. We don't care how and what, but how can you have so many languages over thousands of years correlate? It says that these ancient documents share common themes, they have common purpose, they have the same documented knowledge, and it's all supported by Joseph Smith's pure revelation. So, to me, the Book of Enoch is his, what I call, calling card to say, I am a true revealer of ancient texts. I had nothing in front of me. The Lord gave me this information. Signe Running wrote it down, and now, later, I'm dead and gone. You can compare what I received as a revelation to these texts, and you will know that I had an ancient text given to me.
So this is incredible. So the Book of Enoch is validated through the Book of Jasher.
Yeah.
Both of them valid, and the Book of Jasher independently validates the Book of Mormon.
Yep.
Jasher and Enoch independently validate each other, and they both validate the Book of Mormon.
And it's so sophisticated. When you think about how I've assembled all of this, it's been out there. People have known about this for years. You know, the professors will, if they're listening to this, they'll know that I'm saying this is right, because I don't have your degrees and I'm not, educated like you guys are, and I study it like you do. But, as a amateur, as a person who's done my own homework, if you want to call it that, I'm just saying that I have found that not only is the Book of Mormon a collection of fragments, because really what Mormon's doing is he's collecting fragments of his history and putting it in, but he's including other fragments. That is, the writers of the Book of Mormon are using fragments that they had in their possession in the plates of brass that may have had these fragments in them. And so all of these fragments, even though they are pieces, they're not fully blown. The Ethiopic has got 109 chapters in it. It's a lot of work. But if you go through those chapters and you get my annotated Book of Mormon, not only are you going to read it, but I have all this commentary and I do all of this background insights that you'll see. It's a marvelous book, and it should be read. Now, again, you go back to the document in the Doctrine and Covenants where the Lord says, yes, these apocryphal books have truth in it. You'll know it when the Spirit bears witness to it. Don't discard these books, in essence, he's saying. You don't have to retranslate them, but it doesn't mean that you discard them and you don't look at them. I think it's, to some degree, I am maybe a lone wolf here in the church, but I am bringing them to light so that people can look at them and study them in a way that you have not been able to. And it's not perfect. I'm not a scholar, but I've done enough research and I've done enough researching the commentary from other people, and I include those commentaries in my annotated edition to support what I've studied. And I'm just saying that as you go through it, it'll elevate your understanding of not only the great picture of how the Book of Mormon was assembled, but it supports that they had this plates of brass. And we have now physical evidence that they had the plates of brass, because it's not in the Old Testament. It's found in these other writings that we're now uncovering. Therefore, we can assume they had to be in the plates of brass. So therefore, that's another level that gives us support and confidence that the Book of Mormon is an ancient record that was translated by Joseph Smith in a way that elevates him as being a true prophet and revealer of ancient texts. I personally know that to be true. It's my witness that it's true. And I cannot tell you that, having done with the work I did, that I could ever say anything other than that. I honor him as Joseph. I think of myself when I was 25. I just got married. I had no idea. I did spend a semester with Hugh Nibley in the Senior Topics of Religion in 1975. And what I was at the time, I had no clue, but later I then had a clue. And that was, I had just been witnessing in that semester Hugh Nibley going through what I just described, what I went through. He was researching all the Enoch texts and the literature that had been given to him. and his old age. He had no knowledge about Enoch and the importance until later in life. A general authority came to him. He says, "I've got this Ethiopic book of Enoch. I don't know what to do with it. Have you read it?" He says, "What's that? I don't know what that is." Here's a great scholar, didn't even know about it, let alone Joseph Smith at the age of 25 in the farmland of America. I mean, what I'm getting at, this is remarkable. And so here I am, a 25-year-old like Joseph Smith, having a whole semester of, if you want to call it, Enoch lecture to me, not knowing what I'm listening to. Here I am now 70 years of age, and I get it. I understand it now. And I'm telling you, Hugh Nibley got it right. He says, this is an important book. Enoch is so essential to understanding who Joseph Smith was.
I agree. And I'm going to give a final note here, David. You said something a minute ago about how you're not a scholar. You're not necessarily educated in this field, wouldn't have the credentials that many would look at. But I would challenge anybody taking that train of thought to look at the text, look at what it is, and remember that the Book of Mormon says, "By your fruits you shall know them."
Oh, yeah.
And these books, all these annotated editions, are all bearing witness of the divinity of Christ through the Book of Mormon. I would highly encourage all of you guys to take a look at these books. David, where can they get your books at?
Yeah, well, I'm really happy about this. I mean, what a thrill of a lifetime. They're going to be found in Costco, Deseret Book, Amazon. You've got Digital Legend Press, and of course you got the Rod Meldrum. You go to his bookstore,
BookOfMormonEvidence.org.
Yeah, definitely, he's got them. So they're found there, and of course, guess what? I own these books. I paid for them. I'm the author of these things, or the editors of them. So those who are in the East Coast out there, I live in Raleigh. If anybody wants a signed copy of the book, because I'm the only one who can sign them, you can get them through me. And my company is called Beacon Light Books, LLC. I have a website. You can get them there. Also, you can just email me. It's drhocking, drhocking @gmail. My mother called me David Robert Hocking, so I just chose as an email Dr. Hocking. Most people call me Dr. Hocking, and so my mother was pretty smart. But yeah, call me Dr. Hocking. I don't care, even though I don't have a PhD. But I guess you can say I do have a PhD and that I'm piled higher and deeper in my knowledge of what I'm doing. But yeah, Dr. Hocking at gmail.com. You can just email me and say, Dave, gosh, I'd like what I'm hearing. Can you give me a copy? Just email. I'll tell you what they cost, and then I'll sign them for you. They'll come out of Raleigh, and I'll pay for the shipping. You don't have to pay for that. And hopefully, we'll all be winners for it. I'll be able to sell you something that will have value that you think, I know it have value. Plus, hopefully, with my signature, it just means that it's special value. So, thank you so much for supporting me. The fact is that I do this because I love it. It's personally helping me because I wanted this for myself. I wanted to learn more about it on my own, and if I can make others more comfortable with how they read the scriptures and I can comprehend the scriptures, it's just super bonus for me. I get emotional sometimes. People have seen me cry. Here I'm a grown man, and I get teared up and all that. It's because the Spirit it bears witness to me. I'm getting teared up here, but it just says that I'm doing the right thing, and I'm happy for it. And I thank you for allowing me to share this story with you.
I'm glad to have you on, David. I appreciate you being on. And we will make sure to put all of those, his email, all those links, and where you can find this book in the show notes of this podcast. Again, David, thanks for coming on.
And there you go, guys, my interview with David Hocking. Seriously, what an incredible man and an incredible thing he has done in helping make the scriptures easier to understand. I've been studying the Annotated Book of Mormon myself, and the context it gives you is incredible. It really jumps out from the page and makes the context shine. I highly recommend you pick up a copy and study it for yourself so that you can get a better understanding of the scriptures. The Annotated Book of Isaiah is also incredible. If you've ever been one to go to the many Isaiah classes in your ward or institute, then you'll really appreciate this book. We all know how difficult it can be to understand the book of Isaiah, but it is equally important to understand what is being taught in that book. and then Enoch and Jasher as well. And I will put all of the links he referenced, as well as David's email address, in the show notes for this episode. And that's it for this one, folks. Remember to leave a rating and review wherever you listen to this podcast. Send your questions, comments, and hate mail to mormontraditionalist@gmail.com. Follow me on Instagram @mormontraditionalist for more content. And until next time, remember, never back down from the truth.